All right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Perfect, awesome. Welcome back to another year of Past to Present at Columbia River Maritime Museum. My name's Julia, and I work in the education department here. We are kicking off our season with special guests from the North Coast Watershed Association, Graham Klag and Kelli Daffron. So Graham holds a Master of Environmental Studies from the Evergreen State College and a BS in Biology from the University of Puget Sound. He brings a wealth of conservation experience to North Coast Watershed Association, having worked in native plant nurseries, agricultural farms, and on a myriad of watershed restoration projects from Olympic National Park to the Cascade Head Biosphere region in Salmon River. His recent North Coast Watershed Association projects include several large wood placements in the Big Creek watershed, juvenile coho surveys throughout the North Coast Watershed Association and Nicanicum Watershed Council's service areas, and building a GIS mapping tool for gathering and sharing information about local habitat restoration. He is also an artist, and through his artwork, Graham aims to better communicate how we can fit into our ecosystems and conserve diversity. Kelli grew up in North Carolina, receiving a BA in psychology and anthropology from UNC Chapel Hill. She has worked on farms from Mexico to Canada, learning how to identify and utilize native flora with locals along the way. Since 2018, she has worked in natural resources on the Oregon coast, first as an intern and biological science technician at Lewis and Clark National Historic Park, and for the North Coast Watershed Association, where she started as a contract tree planter in 2019. Now she oversees the water quality monitoring program of the North Coast Watershed Association, produces the podcast Watershed Moments, which covers the work of the Watershed Association, and has begun their bilingual outreach program in Spanish. So without further ado, please welcome Kelli and Graham.
Thank you, Julia, for the lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. As you heard, I'm Kelli, and this is Graham. Thank you for coming out this morning. We are going to talk about some of the pressing issues that the Watershed Association is working on presently and has worked on continually, some being a little bit more new than others. So I'm going to start us off here talking about one of the projects that I currently work on relevant to water quality. Well, first we're going to look at our service area map, just to give you an overview of where we work. So you can see the Columbia River there, and this includes our watersheds as well as the Nicanicum. The Nicanicum is sort of in the middle of our service area in Seaside. And so this is just to give you a visual of where we work and what we do in terms of an organization. So we are an association of watershed councils. We are your local watershed council, and we are here to serve the community. We don't own land. We work with people who want to work with us to do habitat restoration that's good for fish and folks. Okay, so back in the early 2000s in Seattle and the Puget Sound area, a lot of money was pumped into doing habitat restoration for salmon, just like it was here, the beginning of watershed councils. And basically this didn't, yeah, we're going to talk here. A lot of money was pumped into doing habitat restoration for salmon around the Puget Sound area, and they did a great job of that. They created a lot of urban stream habitat that wasn't there prior when it was originally being developed in the Puget Sound area, and the salmon started coming back, and people were really excited, and the biologists were watching the salmon come back, and then they were watching them die before they could spawn in situations like this, Coho in particular, in these smaller streams around the Puget Sound. And so this started sounding alarms for people in that area, and researchers started looking into the problem. And they first started connecting it with rain. They noticed that after a rain, especially the early fall rains, the salmon would start to die before they could spawn. And so they started looking at what was in that runoff and honing it down through a very tedious process of elimination until they arrived at this chemical you see here, 6-ppd quinone. And this is the most toxic substance that we currently know of for fish. The substance can kill fish, the LC50 at the bottom of the slide, at as little as 40 parts per trillion. And so that would be the equivalent of 40 seconds out of 32,000 years in terms of time. So it's a fun perspective there. We don't yet understand the toxicology, why this makes salmon sick. This is a really recent topic of research. It was around 2019, 2020 that 6-ppd quinone was first identified and discovered. So there's a lot of research still happening, but what we do know is where it comes from. The precursor molecule to 6-ppd quinone is 6-ppd, and 6-ppd is an anti-ozonate that's added to tires. Basically, since it was discovered in the 1970s, it's been added to every piece of rubber that's been produced as far as we are aware of. So it's everywhere. It's even in, if you have Vibram soles on your shoes, it's on your shoes. It's on rubber hoses. Anything that is made out of rubber will break down quite quickly in the presence of ozone, and it needs to be protected. Back in the day, they used to wax their tires manually, and to not have to do that, things like this are added to tires. So it is omnipresent. Tires are actually one of the, or possibly the biggest source of microplastics in the world. I didn't realize this, and then I was speaking with our research partner, Ed Kaloje, at the Center for Urban Waters at the University of Washington, Tacoma, and he mentioned that tires, tire wear particles, the little bits of them that wear off as you drive around, are one of, if not the biggest source of microplastics in the world. And I was like, is there plastic in tires? There's something I didn't realize. Is there that too? But the rubber itself is so persistent that, and it is a long chain polymer. It is a microplastic, essentially, in the way that it behaves in the environment. And it can continue to leach out 6-ppd quinone as it goes around. And you can see on this slide the transformation of 6-ppd to 6-ppd quinone. Such a simple change can make such a drastic difference. This stuff has been found in deep sea sediments off the coast of China. It's been found in human urine and human cerebrospinal fluid. TBD on the effects on people as well. How are we doing on time? I'm gonna let you watch a quick video of some of the research that went into discovering this, and you will see my research partner as well in this video. So that was some info from the folks on the chemistry and research end that put in so many hard-earned hours of work to identify this chemical. And to bring it local, what is the NCWA doing about it? It's really cool. In Oregon, there's very few organizations looking into 6-PPD quinone relative to Washington State and California. Being as where Washington is where this was first identified, they're sort of ahead of the curve. California, I think, recently put in a lawsuit against tire companies to start looking for alternatives to 6-PPD as an anti-ozonate. And as far as I know, that is those gears are starting to turn. But in terms of what we can do now here locally as an organization, what I've started doing is testing for it, sending our samples up to Ed Kaloj's lab in Tacoma to be tested for the presence of 6-PPD quinone. I've also started talking to groups of kids at Clatsop Community College and community groups like yourselves and in the high schools here locally to share water quality issues, in particular this one that is a little bit more new that people might not be as aware of. So I started sampling in 2022. I have 11 sites around our service area that you could see here. I shifted a couple of them around. So those red ones were just sampled once or twice and then honed in on the blue and the green ones there. At all of those sites, anytime I take runoff that is coming off of a street and have that tested, it always has 6-PPD quinone in it. It's not a surprise. I don't have all of my data back yet. It takes a long time. So still waiting for some pieces to come back. But as of yet, when I take a jar of water from a stream during a rain event where I think there might be some of this particle, some of this chemical, I've yet to detect any in our streams, and that is good. And it is also potentially me just chasing this chemical cloud that's very difficult to grab. My sites are very far away from each other. I'm one person, the weather's unpredictable, and I have a 24-hour hold time for the lab up in Tacoma. So it's been an interesting logistical process. The persistence of 6-PPD quinone in water is something that's still being discovered and worked on as well. They're seeing it's around 2 weeks in water compared to its parent chemical, 6-PPD. That's a long time. 6-PPD itself only lasts a few hours, less than 24 hours in most sources of water. And in soils, this is still being worked out. Clearly, soils can be very different depending on their makeup and their biology. And so they're thinking it persists for months in soils. But the good thing is that when there's a lot of organic matter in a soil, it can be used as mitigation for this. If you don't have runoff coming straight off of a street into a creek, if it goes through soil, plants, roots, it is very effective. They are very effective at cleaning it up. Just like we all just keep harping on the lungs of the earth, are the swamps and plants and soils are completely necessary for the health of our water and health of everything that depends on it. So there are some sites within my program that do have direct downspouts. They are listed here. I'm particularly concerned about Big Creek at Highway 30. Those do have downspouts that just go straight down into Big Creek. We have been talking and working with the county and sharing our data. We will be doing more analysis using more advanced mapping tools that Graham's going to help me out with to better hone how to move forward and where to move forward with the results of this. And if you would like to learn more, check out my podcast, Watershed Moments. I interviewed my research partner, Ed Kaloj, in one of my episodes. And so you can listen to that. And with that, I will hand it over to Graham.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you all for being here today. Once again, my name is Klag, and I'm with the North Coast Watershed Association as the executive director. And I should also say that if you want to learn more about dams, Kelly also has a podcast that highlights some of the dam projects that we're working on around here. So, uh, so another plug. So we're gonna shift gears from tires to dams and talk a little bit about some of the other things that go round and round that also power a lot of the presentations and homes that are all along the Columbia here. And so I'm going to talk to you all today a little bit about the dams that we have, not only on the Columbia, but some of the dams that were put here actually within our watershed service area due to the Columbia. A lot of people, including myself, did not really realize when he took this job how many local dams we had here in our watersheds. And I will just begin by talking about the Columbia River dams because the Columbia River dams were, quite a engineering feat, but also they were quite a sell. A lot of our work now is trying to make the case for dam removals. They're on in many times are water impoundments that we're working with here. But back in the day, they actually had to convince the people of Moses Lake that they could actually farm in the desert because nobody believed you could actually bring water out there. And well, they showed that community that they could do that. So now I think you'd be hard pressed to convince people not that you couldn't do that. So this is just a map, a little, hopefully you can make it out a little bit there, just highlighting some of the network of hydro dams that are along the Columbia. You've got several federal dams, lots of also, smaller municipalities that have have reservoirs. But all these dams impede juvenile fish passage at some level. So, you hear a lot about fish passage over the dams, such as the John Day Dam here. I just snapped a picture of the fish ladder they have there because I think it's just a wild thing to ask fish to go up that. But then again, they're wild fish, so we might think they're used to that. But even those passage structures are very difficult for the fish to get over. And a lot of times in the springtime, normally what would happen on the Columbia, there would be the spring freshet. So there'd be this massive exodus of water from runoff, and about the time that buoy beer fell in the in the river was about the time when the spring freshet would happen, and it was really the major push for a lot of juvenile salmon to outward migrate to the estuaries and ultimately to the oceans. So with all these dams in place, you're not only controlling that freshet, but also those fish have to move through those dams. So that's where a lot of the kill, unfortunately, comes from. And the first of these dams that were built on the Columbia was Bonneville Dam in 1937 through FDR's New Deal. And I will just segue into the dams that were built here in our local watershed because is the story goes, sometimes you got to build a dam to build another dam, and the Mitchell Act was a hatchery program that really was around to ensure that while the Columbia had all these impediments, there could still be recreational fish produced for the fisheries because actually they knew, the fish biologists told them even back in the 30s that they would lose a certain percentage of the stock every time they put these dams in. So knowing that, they had to come up with some sort of some way to supplement with fish. And so ironically enough, a lot of our dam issues here in our watershed are due to hatcheries, and those hatcheries produce fish. Those hatcheries are often the places where we can where there's a control point to divert the fish back into the hatcheries. So I'm happy to say we do have solutions for these issues. And the good news is that there's been a lot of money flowing thanks to some of the bipartisan infrastructure bills that have moved forward. And we, as your local watershed association, have been working with ODF&W to really meet the moment and take advantage of the policy streams that are in place. And so this one here you actually see in the North Fork Clatskanie River hatchery. That is actually a dam that we're going to start taking out this summer and actually replacing with another project, or similar to another project I'll show you, replacing with a roughened channel. And then we'll still have at the bottom a Obermeyer weir, which is considered a rubber dam, and it'll pop up and divert hatchery fish back to the hatchery when the hatchery needs those fish to go back. Because right now this dam is just there to divert the hatchery fish, but it also blocks all these wild fish and has actually no passage around it. The only way that fish have traditionally been able to get over any of these hatchery dams in our systems, had wild fish that is to be physically trucked over. So we're in the effort to decrease our tire usage and our gasoline consumption. We really need to give these fish volitional passage. And so, there's another side to this, which is that we're also using the Big Creek hatchery through our Return of the Reds campaign for chum salmon, where we're actually growing chum salmon at the hatchery there, because chum salmon are actually very easy to grow in captivity and then release directly once they emerge, because they don't spend as much time as Coho or Chinook do in the hatchery, where they'll spend a year and a half before they actually outmigrate. That's why those ponds are there at the hatcheries. With chum, we can actually just directly implant them into the streams, and then when they come back, we actually move them and truck them into other watersheds where we'd like to increase the chum numbers. So we are trying to use the system that's in place to our advantage. It's just, the goal we need really is to have more passage so that we have more habitat opened up for all the salmon species that live here. So we've got a cool website, returnofthereds.com. I've got a couple cool things coming up here that I'm not going to be able to pull out of the PowerPoint, but I'm going to throw up some QR codes of some of our projects if y'all want to shoot and look at them. But yeah, it's just a very interesting story that we have all these impediments at places that are actually producing fish, and the upper watersheds in many cases are really high value, and so that's where we're kind of making the case by removing a lot of these structures or enhancing them, allowing the case to be made for doing some of the habitat work and large wood placements that we want. And there are also another dam project we have that we've been working on, and this one's a ways off because it's a bit more complex, but this is up on the Lewis and Clark River, and this is the city of Warrenton's water intake. And this is a 26-foot tall structure that that's aging. It was built, I think, in the 20s, and it also has an old fish ladder, which is not necessarily what we would have today. And it actually has a fish ladder, though, so that's one good news. But this is an area where, just due to the physical nature of the place, building an engineered stream bed or roughened channel that would match the historic grade of the stream while still having that intake there, that's not really an option here. So an off-channel water intake would be preferred, where we'd actually, like up in the city of what the city of Bellingham has done, where they've actually diverted the river into an area where they can take up their water that doesn't actually have to have a physical barrier to do that. So just as an example of some of the various structures that we have that not only serve, fish, but also serve communities such as Warrenton, and Gerhardt is not involved, connected to this water supply. So this is a project that on the North Fork, Clatskanie, because believe it or not, we have a North Fork, we have a North Fork, and we have a South Fork. And for those of you who are here, it's not a typo. You're aware. And it's fascinating how this dendritic system has various impediments on it. There was actually two dams on the North Fork and this one on the North Fork, and you can see on that map there where we're pointing out a couple and where this one is. And so we removed this one through a roughened channel project, which is what you're seeing the engineer and contractor working on here, which is basically an engineered stream bed that runs at about a 3.5% grade that matches actually where, in this case, this dam head used to be, because this dam head was actually a water intake for the hatchery. So the hatchery likes the water from this stream because the upper habitat's very untrammeled, not a lot of logging going on up there. there. Some of it's owned by the state. So they like to get the water there to grow the fish. So, in an effort to continue to allow the hatchery to have its water intake, met there, we also were able to allow for, fish passage over now this structure that was in place. So if you got your phones, you want to dive deep, I've got some cool story maps of these projects that I've made and spent a little time, just trying to tell the story in more depth with maps. And I think it's if I could get off the PowerPoint, I would, but in the interest of time and something to keep you engaged and signing up for our newsletter, we'll keep you some thought for food there. So I've had the privilege of working on a couple other big projects that have to do with dams. Maybe you've heard of the Elwha Dam removal. That was actually my first start out of undergrad. I worked up at Olympic National Park, actually collecting seed for the lake beds after the dams dropped. And so, we talk about dam removals, we talk about roughened channels that we're building to accommodate existing impediments, but I thought I'd show you the Elwha Dam removal because it was the largest dam removal in U.S. history. But now it's, a free-flowing river, and it was done in a different way because there was a tribe below, and the tribe galvanized the removal of the dam. And in doing that, they had a village site that would have been flooded if we took it all out at once. So, I think I'll just show you this video that shows you the stages in which it was taken out and, some of the issues that exist, such as the lake bed behind it that still persist and is revegetating as we speak. This was dammed for 100+ years. And so you've got 100 years of sediment behind it, which wasn't necessarily moved very quickly with taking it out in 3 stages. However, the alder and the lupin now have really started to come back in these areas. So there were 2 dams on the Elwha, the lower dam, and then this one I think is the more dramatic Glens Canyon Dam. They actually had a floating barge to take this out. So bit by bit, using literally a jackhammer that was attached to the engineering feats, that were used to put these things in were also employed to take them out. And I've been back to this site since, and now you can't actually get there because the river is now wild and free, and so it's actually taken out the road that you would have needed to access there. So it's a long hike, but well worth it if you are looking for some solitude. So, these are the stories we need right now. And, we also need these fish as well, which this is a picture on the left here of lower Elwha Klallam tribal member with what I believe is 100-pound Chinook. So, when we're talking about restoring these rivers and restoring their functionality, it's not only their flow regimes and the juvenile fish passage, but it's the very size of the fish themselves. And so, my next slide I'm going to show you is another project that's been, very much in the news lately, and now is the biggest dam removal in history. And so this is just completed this fall on the Klamath. And in the Klamath's case, once again, the tribes galvanizing the effort to make this happen. and also very different, riparian system. There's the Klamath sucker, the Lost Creek sucker, and actually the Klamath people said there used to be 80 native sucker species that would migrate between the lakes and the Klamath River periodically. So, just a very unique system that we have here in Oregon, but also a system that due to these dams has really, really seen a change. And in the case of the Klamath Dam, they were actually able to take it out in more or less one fell swoop. And actually, you may have heard that they had a big methane bubble that popped up behind the Iron Gate Dam. Why do you think there might have been a methane bubble behind a dam? Very good. So yes, there was a huge time bomb behind one of these dams because basically there's a huge agricultural production up above. And that's actually another one of the issues that faces the Klamath in a lot of cases is the flow regimes. So hopefully with the removal of these dams, those historic flow regimes that those suckers and other native species really relied on will be also restored for the Klamath people. And so, back home, we're doing our best to try and deal with some of our issues here. And so this is a map to show you, this is that roughened channel completed that you see here that we showed you. So you can just, barely see the head, or you actually can't see the head. You see the kind of rock weir that was put in there to really crib and hold a lot of the engineered stream bed together there. That's what you're seeing. And we're working with a lot of our local landowners. So this is Gary Zeke and Greg Atkinson, who live in the Big Creek watershed, who are very interested in getting the ball moving on some work in that area of our watersheds. But we've got, a lot of the building blocks are here for us. This is a spring Chinook that I took a picture of that was up on the Lewis and Clark, so we still have a lot of the componentry to work off of. And the more that we continue to open up and allow for fish passage in these areas, the fish will be very happy that they're there and very happy that we came through to try and move the needle for them. So I just wanted to show you where these dams were that I pointed out in the beginning of the presentation. There's let's see if I can, is this guy? Let's see, the top one on the right, that's the Nat Creek Hatchery Dam, then the Big Creek Hatchery Dam's moving west. Then that's the OG Dam that we showed you in the first slide on the North Fork Clatskanie that's there. And then that little green cross next to it's where the project that's pictured here is. And then there's actually another roughened channel that was built on the South Fork Clatskanie Fish Hatchery. And that was, some years ago. And then there's the Lewis and Clark River Dam. And then finally, there's also been a roughened channel built at the City of Seaside's water intake on the South Fork of the Nicanicum. So this is a fish map that we've recently made that shows our area and also our partners area, the Nicanicum Watershed Council. So, you see a lot of maps with all of us pictured. It's because we work highly collaboratively and we work across a lot of our watershed boundaries. So within that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what some of that work looks like across those boundaries, and also talk about other jams that aren't maybe dams, but they're really positive for the fish that we're trying to restore and enhance. So this is a shot here from the beginnings of our rapid biological assessment and limiting factors analysis light that we've done, which is a mouthful, I know. But basically, we're snorkeling looking for juvenile salmon and trout. And we covered approximately 200 miles in the first year of the study, and it's been repeated for a second year to do that additional 200 miles. And our goal right now is we're trying to get the funding lined up to do year 3 so that we have the entire salmon cohort pictured and we have a baseline really to measure all of our projects. Because if we know what the baseline is now, as we continue to do work within our watersheds, we should be able to see, hopefully, a linear uptick in those species over time. But like all good things, including these restoration projects, it takes time. This log structure, I think, is just a great example to show you what time, water, and space can do for salmon and steelhead, because you can kind of see it, but they're under, basically under this jam. It scours out a lot. So as it cuts deeper, it actually creates more cold water that comes out from under, subsurface. And so that's where these jams, in addition to providing hiding places for our juvenile coho, like you're seeing up in the front of the camera there, it's also nice and cold and deep. So if you look real close, you can actually see there's a whole bunch of steelhead just packed around the very base of the pool. So just a really great example of what high functioning habitat actually looks like. And ultimately, this is a natural structure, so obviously it's going to work great, but we're trying to put in these artificially and try to see over time, do they achieve the same result in many of these systems where unfortunately large wood was actually, and some people in the audience may even remember these times, was actually removed from the streams because there was so much wood in the streams that it was actually causing bacterial breakdown, and people logged right up to the stream. We don't do that anymore. So lots changed, and within that, our understanding of what fish need has also changed dramatically, which is why we're actually spending money to put wood back in the stream. But I will just say, we work a lot in GIS. We're really trying to translate and transition our organization over into using these tools so that we can, we're a very svelte organization. It's just Erica, I, and Kelly, and our accountant. And so we have to do a lot, over a big area. And so these are some tools that help us do that. And this is just one of those surveys that we've designed to collect information on everything from pool size to juvenile fish, ultimately to being able to calculate density. So in the Oregon coast, our real goal is to see about 2 juvenile coho per meter square. So that is what's considered fully seeded coho habitat. And that fully seeded coho habitat means that the habitat is where we want it. Now, it's kind of hard to see. Thought maybe big enough, but basically those green dots, when you start to see that, you're getting into a better place. And as you can see, there's not a lot of them out there. But where we did find one, in this case, in the Ecola Creek Forest Reserve, where we found fully seeded coho habitat is where a large wood structure was also placed in 2013. So you can see that we can actually see the results, even though we don't see it everywhere. This is hopeful and says that, oh yes, we did that, and we have the data to prove it actually worked. In other areas, you can see like where the OG dam site is on the Clatskanie, where we're going to take that other dam out. There's very low numbers above because of that blockage. So there's very little to no wild fish above there, and so that's why you can also see that in the data. And then we can also look at other things such as spawning gravels, beaver dams, all these things that also come from the dams that we like, the dams that we want to see, the dams that really built the Northwest, the beaver dams, because beaver are an ecosystem engineer that we're also working to restore and enhance, because beaver and coho salmon evolved together. And so that's where we're doing some other projects that if you want to get involved with Kelly and our crew, we are going to actively do some beaver dam analog building, hopefully here in the months to come. And so just some other things too. We've also identified knotweeds, some of the other noxious weeds that we have growing in our waterways that we need to treat. And so this is, another way in which we've inventoried where those things are just by being there, having a quick yes or no question. So just trying to show you all the variety of things, that aren't, the dams are one big project, but there's all these little projects that also come from once you open these things up and can figure out either how to get funding there or potentially get fish there. So I'll just, plug a couple of our projects. This is a large replacement down on Upper Big Creek. That we completed when I first started. Once again, trying to, generate that same kind of habitat structure you saw up on the Nicanicum that was looking so good. We also have done a wetland reconnection, both with Hampton Lumber, down on the other side of the watershed at the bottom, But just there's a variety of things that we do, and we're really excited to work with you all to, really try and make more things happen on private lands, because that's ultimately how we get things done here, is the voluntary willingness of landowners, but also, the resource that is our community, because without you all, we really wouldn't be able to do this. And so I really appreciate the Maritime Center for having us here today, and we're excited to continue this partnership. And maybe I can make a story map for the Columbia Maritime Center when we're all said and done with this. So thanks so much.
You so much, Graham and Kelli. We really appreciate you being here this morning. I'm going to come around with a microphone if folks have any questions they want to ask. And if you could please make sure that you speak into the microphone, you might have to hold it closer than you would initially imagine so that everyone can hear your question.
Kelli had mentioned going to city council meetings, I believe it was city council meetings, to kind of explain the chemical from the tire situation. I'm wondering what what the discussions were, the reaction was.
Yeah, so I've talked with the Public Works Director for the City of Astoria, and we've worked with Clatsop County officials to explain to them what we're doing and let them know how, and if moving forward, if we find that there are issues in the water, how we can work together and mitigate those issues. Likely a lot of that will look like bioswales, or making sure that all stormwater is diverted through organic matter before entering into a stream, because it's so effective at cleaning it up. What happens to the stuff in the soil afterwards is still TBD, but I think everything in good time. So yeah, we're working with the City of Astoria. I've spoken with the Mayor of Warrenton as well. They're aware of this, and Clatsop County officials as well, and they're on board to move forward, but no specific plans have been made yet.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, what are the objections when dams are due to be removed? What are all the objections to removing them other than cost?
Well, I guess cost. And I mean, I think the thing, as we move forward into the future and as the climate it is a changing, we need to also be aware that maybe some people might want to put dams back in. So as water flows get lower, these are going to be concerns that we need to think about. So I think moving forward, there might be the concern if somebody was really a forethought thinker and they were thinking, oh, because this is what we're starting to see down in Southern Oregon on places like the Rogue, where people have water rights, they want to exercise them. However, they can't build a dam that blocks fish passage. So the challenge really still for a lot of this work is water. So one of the reasons one of the things we are really invested in with our water quality monitoring program is to start looking at flow, because most people don't think of our areas having water issues. However, we need to be proactive in terms of focusing in on, okay, well, there's not an issue now, but potentially in the future, we could be, having more uses of water, more draws on it, less summer flows because of less rain or hotter summers. So right now, there's not a lot of pushback. I think the main thing I've heard, there's some areas in the watershed, I've talked with locals one brother was okay with it out, the other doesn't work with the other brother. So sometimes there's, friction where, just to get something going, there might be internal family dynamics, I would say, more than actually somebody not wanting to lose their dam structure. But a lot of these dams aren't really, serving their purpose as much anymore. So there's the objections really we have are just, maybe accessing the property through somebody else's property, or, easements that we might need. I'll tell you, the permitting is the real challenge. So these things take, 20 plus permits to actually get moving. And in many cases, it's more permitting to get a restoration project than to do a development in many cases. So we're often, trying to work within the regulatory framework and our partners. And yeah, I will say that the biggest impediment with the money has been these projects are big and they cost, the OG dam that I showed you. I'll see if I can just go back to that one real quick. That one that we're going to take out, this coming summer, that one is, and this was about a $300,000 project. And then this one here up on the North Fork, that'll be about a $4 million project altogether. So it's going to require about $3 million from ODF, the ODF and W got from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that you heard all about, and now you can actually see the results of. And then we had to go out and get the state match because a lot of times our grant making requires match. So we, in this case, the state needed match. So we went and got the match, and that's where we're going to help the state get this project done. So ODF and W is our biggest partner on that one. So does that answer your question? Oh. Yeah, some of them were hydropower, some of them were agriculture. Actually, a lot of the dams that you hear about on the Snake River and those, further out east, those are really more for navigation. So there's a lot, and Idaho Power makes some power with that is more affordable as well. So there's once these things go in, there's various interests to keeping them in, and sometimes, like in the case of the Klamath or in the case of the Elwha, they age out, and there's a tribal component that has rights that they want to exercise, and their rights are being directly negatively impacted by these dams. So yeah, over time the concrete will age, and it'll be a question of whether or not we fix it or whether or not we come up with another solution like you've seen some of here. So sorry, he has his hand up first.
Did you indicate there was a negative impact from knotweed on the salmon or on the watershed?
Yeah, I mean, so knotweed just, it'll occupy vegetation that would be normally riparian, and it has a potential, like in the Halem, for example, it's really just chocker blocked everywhere, and it crowds out a lot of the native vegetation that keeps the water cool, or maybe drapes out over the water more, or certain insects live on it that, the fish like to eat more. All these plants have different insects that live with them. So yeah, knotweed, unfortunately too, the beaver love to chew on it. So beaver can also be spreaders of knotweed, which makes it even worse in a riparian zone. But yeah, there's a biocontrol out there that's being experimented with to see if we can blunt it back a little bit. But yeah, knotweed, no good. It's a DEFCON 4 plant. So, oh.
I was just wondering how widespread this is nationally.
Knotweed or
No,
dams?
not knotweed. I know
Oh, okay.
knotweed, but I mean this dam removal,
Uh-huh.
and I was on the North Coast Land Conservancy for very and there wasn't much going on.
Okay.
And we had a bunch of crotchety old members, but okay, never mind. Anyway, I'm really impressed by how much is going on now, and I wonder how widespread this effort is outside of the Pacific Northwest.
So we're very, you're very lucky to be able to meet some of the players behind all this work today, because really this is, you're watching what a local watershed council in Oregon can do, because we're a nonprofit that basically we do a lot of work that the state of Oregon would like to see done, but often has to happen on private lands or in many cases with, let's say, ODF and W, where we can get certain pots of money to help those projects. So so I think, you know, what you're seeing here is very unique to Oregon and watershed councils. The land trusts are a little different. They buy up land to then do, you know, their own conservation work on it. Our work, you know, is very much in the, and very great to have you all here, because if you know anybody who has property who would like to be involved with us, and, you know, isn't the North Coast Land Conservancy, because we work with them all the time and do great stuff on their lands too. But if you know somebody who has land of their own and they want to do some work with it, we would love to assist in any way possible. That's where we come in at. But, you know, throughout the state, this is a huge thing. We're doing it all over the place. Dam removals, there's a lot of money going towards it now that wasn't there before. So yeah, you're really seeing, I think, a watershed moment. So.
My question's on the Elwha.
Uh-huh.
It's been 12 years now. Are you seeing the returns that is everything reaching its projections?
Actually, they got their first wild return this year. So, which tracks about right. It takes about that long. It takes about a decade for a dammed river to actually start to see strays and things come back in there, because, you know, there might have been a small handful of salmon that continued to try to make it back. And, you know, now the couple that continue to try actually have the whole shot. Yeah. Now the other challenge there was it broke a lot of people's hearts, because the tribe, the Lower Elwha Column tribe, also put a hatchery on the bottom of it to seed it. So they could speed up the process. So the first wild fish came back. The first hatchery fish is been back for a little while. So yeah. But one other thing I'll say about the Elwha, the nearshore. You know, we talk a lot about what this does for the salmon and the streams, but what the Elwha has done also for the nearshore environment and the estuary where it is also been huge. So, you know, there's other species such as Euclid or candlefish that we have here in the Northwest, which, you know, there's accounts of candlefish being found up in the Sierras because indigenous people used to take it as, you know, well, basically food or candle making as we would trek across the high country. So so there's other species too that benefit just from these overall watershed processes starting to function again. So yeah, it's cool to see, and, you know, hopefully this is our story too.
All right, let's give them another round of applause, please. So